If you are interested in Turkic culture, you have probably seen a symbol like this prior to clicking on this video. But you know what this actually is? It's a tamga. In general, tamgas are symbols or marks that were used by various nomadic peoples, especially Turks and Mongols, for identification and self-designation. Tamgas were also used as official stamps or seals by Turkic and Mongolic medieval and early modern Islamic empires, such as the Turkic Khaganate, the Mongol Empire, Ottoman Empire, and the Mughal Empire. In this video, we are going to take a look at the deeper meaning of tamgas, their evolution, as well as analyze some examples of the most famous tamgas in history. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so that you won't miss any updates. With that being said, let's take a look at the tamga.
They became rulers.
Ohne sie findet man keine wahre Freiheit.
Tamgas are ancient symbols used by various nomadic tribes and cultures in Central Asia, Siberia, and the Altai region. These symbols were used as a form of identification, much like a signature or a family crest, and they were often used to mark personal belongings or livestock. Tamgas are symbols or marks that were used by various nomadic peoples. Tamgas were also used as official stamps or seals by some medieval and early modern Islamic empires, such as the Ottoman Empire and the Mughal Empire. Tamgas were important because they served as a way for individuals and families to identify and distinguish themselves from other groups. Especially for Turkic and Mongolic peoples, this was a way to identify their clans, tribes, property, or animals. In addition, they were used as a means of communication and exchange between different political entities. For example, when trading goods or conducting diplomacy, individuals would use their tamgas to authenticate their identity and establish trust with other parties. Tamgas also played a significant role in the religious and spiritual practices of these cultures. They were often associated with shamans called Kam in Turkic, and were believed to give them protective and mystical powers. In some cases, tamgas were used as a form of divination or fortune-telling, with the symbols being interpreted to reveal information about an individual's destiny or future. However, as tribes evolved into larger tribes, then federations and lastly empires, so did the meaning of the tamga change over time. By the 6th century, the most famous tamga was that of the Göktürk Empire. The ruling Ashina dynasty had lived in and around the Altai Mountains for nearly a century, when Bumin, their new tribal chief in 542, revolted against the Rouran Khaganate. After the Ashina victory over the Rouran, Bumin, together with his brother Istemi, established the new empire, which they simply called Turk. This was the actual self-designation of their tribe. In order to differentiate them from the dozens of other Turkic empires, however, we use the term Göktürk in their case. Their tamga is supposed to be an ibex. It was used as a representation of their tribe, or rather dynasty, while erecting the stele of Kultigan, for example. Think of it as a sort of family emblem that was, at the same time, representing all of the Göktürk Empire. Tamgas have different shapes and meanings depending on their origin and function. Some tamgas are simple geometric figures, while others are more complex and stylized, as we have seen in the case of the Göktürks. Some tamgas, like that of the Ashina, represent animals, plants, or objects, while others are abstract or purely symbolic. Some tamgas have a religious or cultural significance, while others are purely decorative. Let's move on to another example, or rather set of examples. Exhibit B shows the tamga of all 24 tribes that used to be part of the Oghuz state. This entity can be understood as a federation of Turkish families. Following the fall of the Second Göktürk Empire in 745, these families fled their original homeland and resettled near the Aral Sea, further west in Central Asia. There, they reorganized themselves and came to be known as the Oghuz, which means tribe or society. Each of the tribes has an own tamga, as was usual in nomadic Turkic societies. The Oghuz, however, became semi-nomadic, retaining their ancient Tengrist faith but adopting to the climatic conditions of this part of the world. Three of the most important tribes were the Kayi, Afshar, and Bayundur. The Kai Tamga is supposed to depict bow and arrow. The Afshar Tamga is a Bonelli's eagle, and the Bayundur chose a falcon for their symbolic representation. The Kai tribe later founded the Ottoman Empire. Although this claim has been debunked by various prolific Turkish historians, the Ottoman family did indeed care about a connection between their dynasty and the Kai who had arrived in Anatolia shortly after the Mongol invasions. Prior to their migration into Anatolia, the Oghuz Turks had already settled down and most likely founded the Beylik of Karaman, alongside the Seljuk tribe. And the Bayundur founded the Akkoyunlu Confederation, which later evolved into an empire that both in Persian and Ottoman sources is simply called State of Bayundur. Other examples would include the Bulgars, who used the same symbol as the Kai tribe of the Oghuz Turks. And interestingly, the Bosporan Kingdom. In the later phases of the Bosporan Kingdom, the ruling dynasty applied personal Tamgas, composed of a fragment representing the family and a fragment representing the individual king, apparently in continuation of steppe traditions and in an attempt to consolidate sedentary and nomadic factions within the kingdom. During and after the era of the Turkic Khazars on the Caucasus and beyond, the neighboring cultures also adopted the Tamga as a stamp. Examples include the Rurik dynasty and the Kievan Rus. The Tamga of the Mughal Empire in India, which was founded by the Turkic warrior Babur in the 16th century, also made use of Tamgas. The most famous building in India, the Taj Mahal, even has a certain Tamga at display to this very day. One of the most important but also overlooked Tamgas came into use during the Seljuk Empire, which stemmed from the Hunnic tribe of the Oghuz. It was, however, a symbol shared with and possibly taken from other political entities in the region, especially the Eastern Roman Empire. We are talking about the double-headed eagle. It has been used by various cultures and civilizations throughout history, such as ancient Mesopotamia, Persia, Rome, Byzantium, and later on Russia and Germany. The meaning of the double-headed eagle may vary depending on its context and origin. In Byzantine heraldry, the double-headed eagle represented the dual authority of the emperor in both secular and religious matters, as well as his dominance over both East and West. However, the Turkic peoples were very much familiar with the eagle as a political symbol, which stems from Tuğrul, a mythological creature of Turkic and Hungarian culture. The Huns were a nomadic people that dominated most of Eastern Europe, the coastal regions of the Black Sea, as well as parts of Central Europe in the 4th and 5th centuries CE. They did not have a writing system of their own, or so it was thought for a long time. In the 21st century, historians argue that the Huns did in fact have a writing system that might have been the predecessor to what we know as the Old Turkic script. This further elevates the theory that the Huns were, at least culturally, part of the Turkic world. However, some scholars further believe that the Huns may have used symbols or other forms of communication, such as pictograms or ideograms, to convey messages and information. For example, markings or symbols to identify themselves or their belongings, such as on their weapons or horse harnesses. They could have also used these symbols of self-identification when communicating with other peoples they encountered during their travels as a way of overcoming language barriers. Overall, while we do not have direct evidence of the Huns using symbols in a formal or systematic way, it is very likely that they also made use of Tamgas. In the Mongol Empire, a Tamga was a seal placed on taxed items and, by extension, a tax on commerce. Over 100 different Mongolian Tamga are known. Certain Tamga were adopted by individual medieval Mongolic and Turkic rulers, and were consequently used on coins and seals issued by these rulers. Tamga are most widely found on Islamic coins issued by the descendants of Genghis Khan in the various khanates of Central Asia during the 13th and 14th centuries, in particular the Chagatai Khanate. Tamga are of immense interest to numismatists and are discussed in many academic works relating to the medieval Islamic coins of Central Asia. However, numismatists and historians currently have limited options for representing Tamga symbols in text, and cannot reliably interchange text including Tamga symbols because they are either represented as images or are hand-drawn, or use an ad hoc font. We can identify nearly 100 Tamga signs used on coins, although only about half of them can be assigned to a specific ruler, and some of them are variant forms or presentation forms of the same Tamga. When Turkish clans took over more urban or rural areas, Tamgas dropped out of use as pastoral ways of life became forgotten. That is most evident in the Turkish clans that took over western and eastern Anatolia after the Battle of Manzikert. The Turks who took over western Anatolia founded the Sultanate of Rum and became Roman-style aristocrats. Most of them adopted the then Muslim symbol of the Seal of Solomon after the Sultanate disintegrated into a mass of feuding Ghazi states. Only the Ottoman Ghazi state, later to become the Ottoman Empire, kept its Tamga, which was so highly stylized that the bow was stylized down eventually to a crescent moon. Nowadays, Tamgas can still be found especially among people in the Turkic world. And as we have seen, its influence reached far beyond that of the original Turkic and Mongolic cultural spheres. An example for the modern use of a Tamga would be the İyi party in Turkey. It literally means good party. But the İyi can also be read as the Tamga of the Kayi tribe of the Ottomans. With the spread of Turkic and Mongolic tribes into all possible directions, these stamps also found their way into the new conquered areas. But when and why did these people, especially the Turks, actually migrate? This is a question that is essential for our understanding of Turkic history, and indeed Eurasian history as a whole. In the next episode, we are going to take a look at it in detail. Until then, thank you for watching. You can support us over on Patreon and even become a member of our channel right here on YouTube. Khan's Den was founded and is owned by Emre-i Yavuz, who has also written a book about the first Göktürk Empire. Currently, he is preparing the release of his second book, about the Second Göktürk Empire. Keep an eye out.